This nightstand I built has wireless charging built in, and it's portable so you can transport it anywhere you want. But I actually need your help with this, and I'll explain more about it later in the video, but first, let me show you how I built this thing. For the top of the table, I'll be using mahogany wood. Now I got a 4-foot piece of lumber from my local lumber yard, and I'm going to cut it down into about 15-inch sections. So when I have these 15-inch sections, all I have to do is clean up with the planer, and then next I can cut them down to their size. So I don't want a jointer, so what I'll be doing with the boards is I'll be cutting them down on different sides. So I'm marking down which side is A and which side is B. Then I make one cut on one side, I'll flip the board upside down and make the opposite cut on the other side. So when I join the boards together, there will be hopefully no seam in between them, which will make the glue up a whole lot better. Once I have the sides all cut, I'm cutting them down to the final dimensions. I was aiming to have boards about 4 inches wide so I can get a 12-inch piece, because the top of my table is going to measure 10.5 inches. And flipping the boards upside down worked out really well because there was almost virtually no seams in between the boards. So now all I have to do is glue these boards up and then get ready to cut them out to make the top table circle. I'm just using Titebond 2 for the glue up. It'll have plenty of strength for what I need. This table is not going to be subject to a lot of pressure on it. I'll probably just be putting my phone down and there may be some light things I have on the side of my table, so I'm not worried too much about the table delaminating over time. Now I use a lot of clamps for this project, so I want to get the panels as flat as possible. I didn't want to have to run them through the planer again just because it wasn't as thick as I wanted it to be, but the clamps I had on hand did a pretty good job of keeping everything flat. There was just a slight little cup to it, but it's hardly noticeable, so I can continue on with building this table. Now my tabletop is going to be circular, so what I have to do is just find the center point of this plank that I have. When I find the center point, what I'm going to be doing with the router is just measuring about 5¼ inches from the center point of the router. And this is going to give me about a 10.5 inch table. And to do that, all I have to do is just drill in a hole through this little jig that I made. And I put a nail inside the hole, and then what I can do is rotate the router along that point. This is actually going to be a perfect circle. Now I had a video on this in the past, so if you do want to check that out, you can check it out. It's pretty simple to do if you ever want to make circle tabletops, but it's a low budget method that I have to get circular tables. Now I learned my mistake in the past from doing these. What I used to do is I tried to hawk out as much wood as possible, but I learned the hard way that you're not supposed to do that. And if I take little small shallow passes, eventually I'll get through this board. Now using the router caused a lot of mess. I might look into getting the attachment to hook up to my shop vac, but when the router's all done, I can clean up this giant mess. And then I realized it actually is the same as a pizza top. So I did try and spin it a little bit, and to my surprise, it slightly worked. So this is where I'm at right now. I have the top of the table done, and I decided actually I wanted to put a wireless charger at the top of this table, so I had to somehow get this inside of this. Now I bought a hole saw and that should solve this issue, and I practiced on a piece of MDF, making sure I can get a perfect circle to fit inside the wireless charger. The only issue is it causes a little bit of a hole inside of it. So I was thinking about plugging it up with some maple, since I was going to do the legs of maple anyway. I'm going to try and put that wireless charger on top of the table, and if it works out, we'll continue. If not, then I can start all over again. So my idea of getting the perfect circle to put in the wireless charger was to use the hole saw and just drill in a little bit into my tabletop. And when I have that drilled in, what I'll do is take the router out and I'll flush trim the rest of it, just going down slowly, level by level, until I get a perfect circle the size of my wireless charger. Once I had my router dialed into the right settings, I was doing the same thing that I did earlier, just taking shallow passes, filling out the circle. With this one I was extra careful to make sure I got right to the edge of the circle. It was really tricky at first, but I took my time with the router and I got right up to the edge of the circle. And with this, it gave me the perfect template to now go down and route out the rest of this channel. I had the perfect depth for the wireless charger putting it in, but then realized it actually didn't work yet, so I had to go down a few more levels, and I made a thin veneer of the wood on the top, which actually made the top very fragile. But then I just have to route out some slots to fit in the cores to make sure it fit in flush with the top of the board, and I'll plug these in later once I get a couple of my scraps at the end of the build. But with this, it made my wireless charger fit flush, and after all this I decided to test it out and see if it works. And it works. Now I never really had a plan for the legs, so I thought might as well just base the legs off of this circle. So I'm just tracing out the circle here and then drawing a couple lines using some of my rulers. And with that, I can maybe get a shape of the legs I can work with this table. I'm just erasing some lines that I don't think will fit perfectly. And then once hopefully I got enough good lines in there, I can probably get some legs that work for this table. Right now I'm just shading in some parts I think that would work. And it actually ended up being a little bit too big, so I actually cut this in half. And this is the design I'm going to use for my legs. So I haven't used the jigsaw a lot of times, maybe only the second or third time I'm using it for a build. The first time was building out a maple leaf for the Canada Day flag I made back in July, and it seems pretty straightforward. I tried to get as close as possible to the lines, but I knew there was going to be some humps and bumps I had to sand out, but as long as I got it close as possible to the lines, it should turn out well. And for my first template, I think they did a pretty good job, and I can use this for future builds now. So the legs are going to be made out of maple wood, and just like the mahogany, I don't have boards wide enough, so I cut these boards 12 inches long, then glued them together, just to make sure I have enough surface area to cut out the legs. Now I didn't want to do two glue ups, so what I ended up doing is putting some packing tape in between two of the panels, just to make sure that nothing stuck together. There's no glue there, but I didn't want them to get glue on by accident. So while the legs are being glued together, I decided to work on the top, just sanding it down to 150 grit. And then when I had it sanded down, I actually rounded out the edges just using my little hand sander. I didn't want to risk getting tear out with the slot that I cut for the wires, but when I had that all done, I just used some spray polyurethane on. This is actually one of my first few times using it, so if I'm doing anything wrong, please let me know down in the comments. I'm just spraying it side to side, make sure nothing clumps up, but if I'm doing this wrong, let me know how to do this properly. I made sure I got both sides with the even amount of coat, and the burning on the inside, I couldn't bring myself to sanding that out. No one's ever gonna see it, and since this is my first table, I figured, hey, why not try and learn from this one and then build it again properly another time. The first issue I ran into was the veneer. So since it was very thin, once I applied the finish, it made little ridges. So I read online to fix this, you just have to spray it with water, then use an iron at the seam setting, and then it should flatten out once you clamp it down with pressure. So I said, why not? Since this is my test board, I'll just try it out and hopefully this works. And I didn't really have the right things to clamp it down, so this kind of did the job. And when I took it out, yes, it made it flat, but it also did cut off a huge chunk of it. So I took some glue and I decided, well, I'll just glue it right back to the top and then sand it down. And now at least I know this for the next time. If I have a thin veneer, it probably will warp over time, or at least don't put moisture on it. So I have to take some precautions in it to make sure that doesn't happen. So if I try this again, it might not turn out as bad. Hopefully, we never know what's gonna happen. And yeah, I used a hockey puck to flatten it out. It actually did the job better than my fingers, so it worked. So while the top dried, I just put the legs to a planer just to get everything flat and level. I brought them down to a little under 3/4 of an inch, and I wasn't too sure the thickness I wanted for them, but I thought if this was too thick, I can always just shave it down a little bit more. So I have my leg template that I have set up here, so I'm just using this double-sided tape to stick it to it. And I'm going to take my router and do the exact same thing that I did to make the circle. Just run the router along the template lines, and then hopefully this turns out well. So the first thing I tried doing was just not having the sides cut off and then running the router through this, but then I noticed it started getting caught around the sides, so I decided to do one leg like this. And once I finished this leg, I actually took everything out. I repeated the same process for the next leg. The only difference is I took the jigsaw and I cut off the sides, so there's a lot less material for my router to use, and with this it actually went a whole lot faster. I did this leg in half the time it took for the first leg, so it's definitely the step I take when I'm building legs for another time. And now what I'm doing is just putting a small round over on my legs. And this makes the curves nice and smooth. Now all I have to do is sand out these legs to get it nice and smooth. So I'll have the legs ready and the top wood ready, so I just have to attach them together. And for doing template legs for the first time, it turned out pretty well. There's some burn marks I left in there, But I'll sand them out later. The first thing I have to do is attach these two pieces together. So I'm doing is just marking the exact same lines on the pieces and the thickness of the wood. And then when I cut slots in the wood using my router and then a couple of scrap pieces I have just taped down with double-sided tape. And this is going to allow the legs to interlock with each other. I'm going to cut the top off of one of them and then the bottom off the other. And they'll be able to interlock and then stand up nice and straight. And I had no clue if this was going to work, but that seems to be a common theme of my build. And now I'm going to attach the legs for the first time, so I didn't even know if it was going to work before I started recording. And then with a little bit of fidgeting and then pushing the legs down, I got them to fit and seat. And this was the first time I actually made legs for a table or anything, and I'm actually really proud of how it turned out. For a first time, I say I did an okay job. I give it a 4.5 out of 10. So now this is the point in the video where I need your help. The tabletop that I have right now is removable because I actually haven't attached the legs to the table. I want to do that first just to make sure I didn't make any mistakes with it, but I want to know from you guys, what is the best way of attaching these types of legs to this tabletop? When I cut the slots for the boards, I cut the slot a little bit wider just in case I can attach a clip to this. So maybe attaching a clip to this bottom and that to the top might work. I didn't want to just glue it, so maybe a screw through one of these posts. Just want to see what was the easiest way to attach this. And also with this tabletop, how do I avoid getting the cracks in the veneer? Is it unavoidable, or is there a trick that I can do to make sure to not get it to move as much? Because there's a huge crack right in the middle that I'm just going to probably fill with just sawdust and glue. But let me know down in the comments what I can do better in this video, or tips I can use to make this process a whole lot easier. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys later.